1958's Varan, directed by Ishiro Honda. Many of you will have questions. Bill, why are you on camera? When is your Shin Godzilla video going to be available again? And why was Rodan, which came out in 1956 in color, and then 2 years later Varan in black and white? 1, as the great Mike Francesa would say, it's my show, I'll do whatever I want. 2, the Shin Godzilla video will eventually be re-uploaded.
それ微妙だね.
And 3, well, the answer starts with the success Toho films were enjoying in the US during the second half of the 1950s. American audiences embraced Godzilla King of the Monsters in 1956 and Rodan in 1957, which caught the eye of television executives. One company in particular approached Toho, requesting that they produce a monster spectacle made exclusively for the American market. Toho producer Tomoyuki Tanaka saw an opportunity to turn a quick profit, and thus, Varan was conceived. The making of Varan is a story that has been well documented by film historians such as Stuart Galbraith, John LeMay, David Milner, Steve Ryfle, and Ed Godziszewski through various interviews and publications. That said, its origins are a little bit clouded. The general story seems to go like this. At first, Toho and Tanaka were tasked not with creating a movie for theaters, but with producing a multi-part US TV special. While color television existed in the 1950s, it wasn't yet widespread, so the film was instead shot in black and white. Interestingly, the plan from the start was for it to be titled Varan the Unbelievable, and dubbed in English for this US release. According to Galbraith, Toho did in fact produce an English-dubbed version, though no one has seen it and no other sources have been able to verify that claim. Toho writer Ken Kuronuma, who had penned Rodan just a couple of years earlier, was hastily approached by Tanaka and asked to come up with any kind of new monster idea. Tanaka really didn't care what, just make something. Notably, this would be the last giant monster movie the writer would pen for Toho. Kuronuma's story treatment was then passed to screenwriter Shinichi Sekizawa. I've said his name probably a million times in the last few years. Sekizawa was instructed to keep the script as straightforward as possible for their intended US audience. Director Ishiro Honda and special effects maestro Eiji Tsuburaya, now regarded as masters of the giant monster genre, were assigned to the project. This also marked the first collaboration between Honda and Sekizawa, a duo that would go on to craft some of the most memorable Godzilla films. However, this initial effort, known by various titles including Baron, Varan, Kaiju Baron, and Varan, the Monster from the East, would prove to be less than a stellar start for this iconic partnership. One of the main reasons for this, as I mentioned earlier, was that Honda had been filming Varan in black and white to meet television broadcast requirements. But then, midway through production, Toho was informed that the US TV company that requested the special had either gone out of business or pulled out of the project, depending on which source you go with. In response, having already sunk resources into this, Toho hastily retooled Varan for domestic theaters. But starting over wasn't an option. Doing so would have meant losing money, as Honda himself later explained. This change was forced on us. We were shooting things so that they looked big and powerful on the small screen, but suddenly we had to take the same footage and try to make the same impression for the big screen. It just doesn't work that way. And on top of that, we had been shooting based on the premise of making it in 3 episodes. Now we had to somehow combine it all into one continuous story. Of course, it did not work. We had a very hard time adjusting it. The desk side planners just did not understand how the filming side worked. So, instead of a multi-part TV movie titled Varan the Unbelievable airing on American television in 1958, we got Kaiju Varan, released in Japanese theaters on October 14th, 1958. The 1958 film's international title is simply Varan, and it kicks off with a surprisingly strong opening. We're immediately shown a striking bust of the monster. Godzilla fans will instantly recognize the music playing here. Even if you've never seen Varan but are familiar with the Showa-era Godzilla films, this track, or variations of it, is typically what you'd associate with scenes of Rodan or other kaiju laying waste to cities. Following the credits, there's an intriguing sequence featuring a miniature rocket launch. The narrator contrasts humanity's potential exploration of space, once only a dream, with the mysteries that still remain on our own planet. The Toho monster films of this era often show a similar pattern, highlighting for Japanese audiences the stark contrast between their traditional past and the rapidly emerging modern world of technological advancement and bustling cities, a dynamic that writer David Kalat describes as a quote-unquote clash of cultures.
ビリー目がテレプロンプター困ってるぞ。いやのか?
You know, you're really starting to annoy people.
Yeah.
It's at this point that we're told we're about to witness the most mysterious story ever told. The movie doesn't quite live up to that claim, but as I mentioned earlier, the story behind its creation is somewhat mysterious. In most sources that talk about this, ABPT Pictures, a division of ABC, is said to be the ones who made the original request for Varan. As to why they pulled out halfway through, that isn't definitively known. The most mysterious story ever told starts with non-native butterflies being discovered in the fictional Iwaya village, a small isolated community deep in the mountains of northern Japan. Even though the movie is set in a remote location, nearly all of its scenes were shot on outdoor sets in the Toho lot. In their book on Ishiro Honda, Steve Ryfle and Ed Godziszewski quote assistant director Koji Kajita as saying Varan was an easy and enjoyable film to shoot. Principal photography apparently wrapped in just 28 days, and as I was talking about, that's mostly because there was minimal location work. The film refers to this region as the quote-unquote Tibet of Japan, an area untouched by the modern post-war world. A scientific expedition into Iwaya village led by two scientists ends in tragedy when they are killed. The villagers believe they were killed by their mountain god, Baradagi, or however the hell you say it. The characters outside the village are hesitant to believe that such a creature could exist, which highlights how these early Toho monster films were originally treated as standalone stories. Because if the movies had been linked from the start, the existence of something like Varan wouldn't have seemed so far-fetched after the events of Godzilla and Rodan. The inciting incident of these scientists being killed sets three main characters, if you can really call them that, on a perilous journey. Yuriko, the sister of one of the victims, seeks the truth behind her brother's death, portrayed by Ayumi Sonoda. Sonoda previously played an exotic dancer in The H-Man, a movie that came out a few months before Varan. Her character Yuriko is accompanied by Horiguchi and Kenji, played by Fumito Matsuo and Kozo Nomura, respectively. Nomura is likely the only main cast member most Godzilla fans might recognize, as he appeared in multiple entries in the Godzilla series, but this would be the only Toho monster film he would be a main character in. More familiar Godzilla regulars from this era show up in smaller roles, including Yoshio Tsuchiya and Akihiko Hirata. Hirata once again steps into the role of the resident scientist, and just as in Godzilla, he ultimately unveils an invention that helps stop the monster. And just like in Rodan and many other later Toho films, he delivers his trademark, long, technical speeches explaining the science behind the chaos. I have to wonder if at some point this was just an inside joke within Toho. As much criticism as this movie gets, I found the first act to be genuinely engaging. Varan's first extended appearance comes when the main cast reaches Iwaya and tries to rescue a young boy who wandered off after his dog. The boy and his pet are saved, but in the process, Varan is awakened and rampages through the village. Varan is a giant prehistoric reptile said to have lived for millions of years at the bottom of a lake near Iwaya village. The locals know him as Baradagi Sanjin, or Baradagi, the mountain god. Interestingly, radiation is never mentioned in his origin story, making Varan arguably the first Toho kaiju without a radioactive background. The Japanese Defense Forces attempt to lure him out of the lake to destroy him, but their efforts ultimately fail. Like Godzilla, Anguirus, and Rodan before him, he proves highly resistant to conventional weapons. Surprisingly, the scientists suggest this isn't due to the thickness or hardness of his skin, but rather its flexibility. I sort of see this as similar to how a bear's loose skin can shift and move over its muscles, making it difficult to land a truly devastating blow. The monster's weakness is revealed to be that it's easily distracted by flares or light, which sounds awfully familiar. Varan's roar closely resembles Godzilla, and it seems more like an altered variation of that existing sound rather than a completely new creation. While many hold a low opinion of the movie itself, Varan's design is often praised, and personally I find the design to be really cool and unique. A neat and creepy feature is that it has 5 fingers on each hand like a human, meaning for the time being AI will probably have a tough time creating this guy. But by far the most notable thing about Varan is that he can glide, often compared to a flying squirrel. The monster uses this ability to continue his rampage to other parts of Japan. In some ways, Varan is portrayed as possibly surpassing Godzilla and Rodan,
かつさ
capable of doing everything they can do: swimming, diving underwater, moving on land on both 2 and 4 legs, and even taking to the sky. Haro Nakajima, already established as Godzilla's suit actor, performed most of Varan's movements, often crawling on his knees for realism. Katsumi Tezuka stepped in for water scenes. According to 2012's Toho Special Effects Movie Complete Collection, Nakajima would once again get injured like he did in Rodan. During the Haneda Airport battle sequence, the truck explosion severely burned Nakajima's stomach. Perhaps one of, if not the worst injury he suffered during filming these movies. The injury was blamed on the suit being thinner than other kaiju suits. He wasn't the only one to get hurt. Tezuka would be electrocuted during an underwater scene when a detonator's timer malfunctioned. Eiji Tsuburaya led the effort on designing the titular monster. Per August Ragone's book on Tsuburaya, the master of special effects wanted the monster to be a hybrid of Godzilla and a kappa from Japanese folklore. The creation was a team effort led by some of Toho's most skilled special effects artists. The suit was divided among several craftsmen. Teizo Toshimitsu sculpted the head, Kanju and Yasue Yagi handled the body, and newcomer Keizo Muraze built the skin, back, and claws. Art director Akira Watanabe would add the gliding membranes to the monster. It would be Muraze's ingenuity which brought Varan's texture to life. According to the sculptor in an interview with Brett Homnick, part of Varan's back design came from a casual moment shared with Eiji Tsuburaya while the two were snacking on peanuts. He suggested to Tsuburaya that Varan's back should be molded after a peanut shell. He would also fashion the claws from translucent vinyl tubing. The dorsal spines were designed to have a biological transparency created by cutting rubber hoses and covering the ends with vinyl tape, an idea proposed by Muraze. The eyes were also translucent with pupils hand-drawn using marker, allowing internal lights to glow from within. To depict flight, the team constructed a half-scale puppet and a hand-operated prop, which were used alongside the full-size suit. Despite the craftsmanship, Tsuburaya later admitted he was dissatisfied with the bulky, overly muscular look of the costume. Overall, Tsuburaya's special effect work in the film falls short of his usual standard, largely because he knew the project had a minimal budget and was originally intended for television. As a result, details he would normally refine were overlooked, and several scenes even recycle footage from earlier films like Godzilla. For much of the crew, this film was more of a routine assignment than a true passion project. That said, I did like the small parts that show Varan underwater. I think I'm just a sucker for water scenes. Professor Sugimoto, played by Koreya Senda, explains to everyone that Baradagi is actually a Varanopod from prehistoric times. I've noticed that much like Godzilla and many other giant monster movies, these creatures always seem to carry 3 distinct identities: a mythical background with an ancient legendary name, a scientific explanation with a formal technical name, and a modern-day reality where people give them a contemporary, more casual name of their own. This layering of names makes the monsters feel like more than just fictional creatures. They exist in legend, science, and reality all at once, as if they've always been part of our world. 2 things I really liked about Varan's early attacks are the way it's often surrounded by fog or mist near the lake. It would have been great if that eerie fog followed Varan wherever it went. And the moment where the dead fish float to the surface before Varan appears, that shot instantly made me think of 2023's Godzilla -1. Though in this case, it's probably caused by the chemicals the military dumps in the lake, rather than anything to do with the monster. The rest of the movie takes a similar approach to Rodan, beginning in a small localized setting before widening focus as the government intervenes, pushing the initial characters to the sidelines while the military takes charge in the fight against the giant creature. Aside from a few standout moments like Varan's battle at sea and some striking visuals, the rest of the movie dragged for me and sort of flatlines. The ending isn't anything spectacular either. They basically take advantage of Varan's propensity to be enamored by flares. He actually eats one with the special dynamite Hirata's scientist character created. The device explodes, killing the monster from the inside. The movie ends shortly after, and so there's some closure for Yuriko as she sees the monster who killed her brother be vanquished. Both Kuronuma and Sekizawa had the story ending slightly different in their writings. Kuronuma's ending had a jet fighter crashing into a fuel reserve and the explosion kills Varan. Sekizawa had the military using balloons to drop the flares rather than helicopters. After the inventive endings of Godzilla, Godzilla Raids Again, and Rodan, it feels like Toho's brain trust couldn't come up with a stronger conclusion for the film. Or perhaps they could, but didn't want to waste a good idea and what was considered a low-priority project. Maybe that's also why Honda didn't bother collaborating with Sekizawa to weave in any obvious deeper meaning this time around. Varan received very little attention in Japan and is often regarded as one of Toho's weakest monster films. Many critics point to its lack of originality and predictable story as the main reasons for its poor reception. Ever since the rise of the internet, and even before, with mass movie reviews, there's always been a tendency for someone to come along years after a film has been torn apart and confidently declare, "This movie's actually really underrated." Whether they truly believe it or not, or are just saying it for attention, is always up for debate. I'll just say it up front, no, this movie is not underrated. It's rated exactly as it should be. It is indeed the black sheep of Toho's early monster films to this point. Godzilla carried deeper meaning, Godzilla Raids Again delivered an exciting monster battle, and Rodan offered a fast-paced horror to kaiju spectacle with an emotional finale. And then you have Varan, which felt like a cookie-cutter monster movie. Even director Ishiro Honda admitted years later in an interview with David Milner, "This is not a work I am happy with." As for Sekizawa, one of his trademarks, buried beneath the recycled footage and rough special effects, is the occasional witty line slipped into the dialogue, a glimpse of the lighthearted humor he would later bring to the genre, which up to that point had largely been somber and played completely straight. Oddly enough, even though the movie was originally planned for American audiences, it wouldn't reach the US for about 4 years. Finally debuting under its originally planned title,
Varan, the Unbelievable.
Varan the Unbelievable. So at least that part of the original plan survived. But the version released in 1962, produced by American company Crown International, was almost entirely different from the 1958 Japanese Varan. Similar to what happened with the 1954 Godzilla, which was reworked into Godzilla King of the Monsters, new scenes were filmed featuring an American actor as the lead character. Aside from the monster scenes, very little from Honda's film remains, and he doesn't even receive a credit in the final version. Hilariously, the main characters from the 1958 movie are simply referred to as college friends of the new American protagonist, one Commander James Bradley, played by Myron Healy. Healy was frequently cast as villains and henchmen in American westerns. Despite the silliness of it all, I found the Americanized version a lot more interesting. In this version, US Commander James Bradley is sent to a remote Japanese island to conduct chemical tests meant to purify salt water for drinking. The experiments anger the local villagers who warn him about a creature they call obake.
Drums. Drums and weird native chants. They really think they can scare me away with this superstitious nonsense? I have a job to do here. It'll take a lot more than mumbo-jumbo to make me leave before I finish that job.
The tests eventually awaken Obake, leading to chaos as the monster rampages through Japan. Obake is a Japanese word that generally means ghost. In folklore, certain Obake or yokai are known for their ability to shapeshift. So in a way, given the patchwork nature of this film and how its form was altered for American audiences, it feels like a fitting, almost meta name. It also works thematically, with modern military power and the rationale of science intruding on an untouched land, while the Obake represents the lingering, haunting, mythical forces of nature pushing back against that encroachment. There's even a scene where Bradley is attacked by a villager, which is outrageously never mentioned again, not even moments later when his wife is right there and asks him what the hell just happened.
What's the matter, Jim? Can't you sleep?
Oh, no, not with those natives chanting their prayers all night, I couldn't.
Natives? Chanting?
I guess he's the strong silent type. You know, like Gary Cooper.
He was gay, Gary Cooper?
No! Are you listening to me?
For many critics and viewers, the most groan-worthy element of this version is most likely the dynamic between Commander Bradley and his wife Anna, played by Japanese-American actress Tsuruko Kobayashi. From the opening scene, Bradley treats her more like a secretary than a partner.
Compliments and sympathy appreciated. Now, you enter those notes in the logbook like a good secretary, huh?
I start getting dinner ready, like a good housewife.
Dictating notes and speaking to her as if she were a child. I just found it hilarious, which kept me more engaged than the original movie. It reminded me of Zach Brannigan from Futurama bossing around Kif. It's also noteworthy that for 1962 America, showing an interracial couple on screen, while not unheard of, could still be considered bold for that era. Just a few years earlier, the film Sayonara had made headlines for its portrayal of interracial romance, even winning Academy Awards. Yet it remained a subject that mainstream Hollywood treated cautiously. Despite all of the unintentional laughs this version gave me, one moment genuinely caught me off guard. When Bradley finds out from an upset Anna that the press and public are tearing him apart, he tells Anna that there are worse things in life. For example, like making his wife cry. Honestly, that's a really touching line. I liked it. The American version ends up being far more mysterious than 1958's so-called most mysterious story ever told. One reason is that Varan's fate is left uncertain in this version. We're never given a clear answer as to whether or not the creature truly died, or maybe he somehow survived. Honda didn't even know the American version existed until years later when asked about it. A fact that's pretty fitting considering very little of his work is used in the movie. Bottom line, if you're looking for a good laugh, give 1962's Varan the Unbelievable a watch, at least for the first half. Much like the Japanese version, it really drags in the second half, even with its trimmed 70-minute runtime, compared to the original's nearly 90-minute runtime. All in all, 1958's Varan, despite its cool monster star, leaves most fans unmoved. Seen through the lens of history, Varan feels like a rough, low-resolution sketch of the fantastical kaiju stories that writer Shinichi Sekizawa would later bring to life in full color and imagination.
Who can really say that Obake does not lurk somewhere in the deep, waiting for the right moment to return? Could happen. Maybe 100 years from now, maybe tomorrow. It might even happen today.
Baka Billy. 自己プロの角度を間違って編集たくさんすることになって向かってる。